Hi, my name is Sarah. I'm with the Midwest Writing Center, and I'm excited today to interview Collins Writers Conference novel writing faculty Rebecca Entel. Rebecca Entel is the author of a novel, Fingerprints of Previous Owners, stories and essays in such journals as Guernica and Lit Hub, and she has Flash in Jellyfish Review, Copper Nickel, and elsewhere. She teaches creative writing, including a novel writing course patterned after the National Novel Writing Month, U.S. and Caribbean literature, and literature of social justice at Cornell College. As director of Cornell's Center for the Literary Arts, she oversees a visiting writer series, workshops and events, a literary and art magazine, and an internship program. She also mentors in the PEN America Prison and Justice Writing Program. Thanks for hanging out with me today, Rebecca. I'm a fan, and I've heard amazing things about you as a person. Sorry that that was on camera. Um, this sweet boy is a former stray adjusting to life indoors.
Aw.
Um, yeah. So thanks for being here. For folks interested or unaware of the Collins Writers Conference and or what you're going to offer, I'm going to read your course description and then I'll ask you questions really specific to your course at the conference and other things about your writing life. So
Thanks
the
for having
no
me.
thank you. Novel workshop, planning for the long haul. This one is going to be 3:30 to 5 p.m. on each day of the conference. That's June 26th, 27th, 28th. Here's the description. Every writer has good days and bad days, and the long-term project of a novel will include frustrating periods of blank pages. How can you stay the course with a process that could take years? This workshop will provide a variety of strategies for writing through the fallow periods, approaches to getting started and plotting, writing prompts for any stage of the process, and short and long-term planning tools. This workshop will be generative with many opportunities to share your work. You'll leave the workshop with new pages, as well as new tools to get you through the rest of your long haul. Writers of any stage are welcome, those with full or partial drafts, as well as those just looking to get started. First, I want to say that's a dream. As someone who has a novel in mind,
Yeah.
has some pages down. I get really I get really stuck on remembering that there's like another 100, 200 pages ahead, and that freezes me up. So, based on this description, I imagine that that's something that you'll address. Can you tell me a little bit about how you may be addressing folks who freeze up when they realize how much work is ahead of them?
Yeah, and I think that part of it is just realizing how common that is. I think sometimes people feel that they are failing in some way or that their project isn't worthy if they get stuck or haven't worked on it in a while or something's not working. And I think just knowing that all novelists are kind of going through similar things at different points and everyone is kind of sick of their project at some point or doubts their skills at another is really helpful. So coming together in any sort of community and class is just, I think, a great thing for writers to do, especially with the isolating work of a novel that can go on for so long. And I found for myself when I was writing my first novel, I'd written, short form for a really long time, but it was my first real attempt at writing a novel and in teaching novel writing to students that in some ways you're kind of tricking yourself to keep working all the time, and that's what you need is kind of a bag of tricks. And sometimes I talk to my students about, okay, imagine you're gonna feel like you're in a hole at some point. What are the ropes you can like lower for yourself ahead of time so you'll have them when you need them? So, just things like writing prompts that can work for any sort of project, trying out different approaches. Some people do write start to finish. I'm more of a fragmented writer. I kind of write all over the place and then figure out how to fit together. Some people outline, some people don't. Some people are in between. So I think just learning all the tools that are out there and kind of figuring out what works for you as a writer and at different points of your process can make the difference between finishing a book and not finishing it.
That's like I already feel better about myself. Thank you for that. I'm also really encouraged to hear, this is just for me personally, that you use the term fragmented, and that's how I go. I'm like, this is going to come out right now.
Yes.
we'll order it later, I guess.
It's
Um,
better to get that out than, think, oh, I can't write that yet. I have to write these 30 pages first. That's not helpful. So, yeah.
yes, thank you. I feel so much like you have to lean into what wants to come out. And I
Yes,
think that can be really scary too because of those intervening 30 pages.
true. Hmm.
Um, I, you you mentioned in the description too, that it's going to be generative regardless of, sorry about that sound, regardless of what stage in the process you're in.
Hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about how prompts can work when you're mid-process?
Yeah, so sometimes I start with the prompts that I used myself when I was writing my first novel. So on days when I was really stuck, I kind of chose a minor character who I didn't expect to be writing that much about and just wrote from their point of view for a while. And those kinds of prompts just really changed my book. It taught me so much more about the setting and the community, and some of those characters did end up coming in, and their stories ended up being heard from their point of view. Or it just enriched kind of the world around the main characters. So some things like that. I think no matter where you are in the process, if you're very early on, if you're farther down, prompts like that just kind of take you away from thinking about that 200 or 300 pages you're going to write, and just lets you develop a little bit more about your work and kind of get words flowing, takes the pressure off, and then also you never know what's going to come out in those sessions and how it might change your story. Also things like interviewing your character, which I find really fun. And things you might not have thought about, like what song did you hate in middle school or something. And there are certainly versions that work for, science fiction characters who might not have gone to middle school or something like that. But you never know kind of what those little details are going to open up in your brain about your character, about the world they're in, and also just help you feel like you are deepening your knowledge of the book, even if the words you're putting on the page don't end up in the final version, which I think can be really helpful. So I'm a big fan of those kinds of prompts that can work early on, even before you've started writing, as well as much later in the process.
I appreciate that so much. I feel like I'm always really intimidated by questions like, what's something you know about your character that isn't in the text? I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know, but I do. Like I
Right.
obviously do.
Yeah.
Like like what kind of music the protagonist listens to doesn't
Mhm.
ever come up in the text, but I know it. I'm so intimidated by those questions. So I think that having prompts around that, like I can see immediately how that would be wonderful.
Yeah.
With the long haul, and I love that term. I don't,
That's how
with
it
the long
feels.
haul in mind, are there places you see a lot of people getting stuck since you teach this regularly?
Yeah, I think that I tend to have students who have so many ideas or certain ideas that they've been attached to for years. And they're really excited to get started and they can kind of get, a chapter or so out or 50 pages or whatever. And then they get stuck because what comes out on the page is never exactly how you imagine it in your head. Or you realize that there's something you didn't know that you thought you knew, or, something isn't working. So I think it's kind of at that intro to intermediary space where most people get stuck and where I get stuck myself because kind of the initial energy maybe is waning a little bit, and so that's the space where I think a lot about, okay, maybe I'm not a big outliner at the beginning, but I do like to use outlines as kind of diagnostic tools along the way. So I'm like, okay, maybe I'm getting stuck here. Let me kind of write out what I've done and what I know is going to happen. And that kind of at least helps me see where I need to figure things out. Or maybe I realize that I don't need that 30 pages before this thing I'm excited about. Maybe, you know, I can kind of go with what I'm excited about and I don't need that, excuse me, what just feels like connection or filler to get there. And so, yeah, I think that's the space where I think once you get far enough in, you've got some more momentum, but I think that's where the lag kind of happens usually.
I think mid process outlining.
Yes.
I've never heard that before. That's
I do
genius.
it all the time.
Um, now I have my own guesses about how you developed or came up with the idea for a class like this, but do you mind telling us?
Sure. So when I first started teaching at Cornell College, my students were always telling me about NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month. And I thought it sounded very strange and not like anything that would ever help me. It just didn't make sense to me. And then when I was working on my novel, it was kind of coming around to be November, and I was like, what I really need is just word counts. This is a time in the process where I just need to generate and like keep pushing forward. And so I tried it out and I didn't follow all the rules. I wasn't starting from scratch and that kind of thing, but I did do those daily word counts and it helped me so much. And I think in the past I had thought more like, oh, I'm going to write for 2 hours, but then what does that look like? You're not usually really writing for 2 hours. So really feeling like, okay, if I want to do 2,000 words today, I've done 1,200. Tonight I'm going to sit down, I'm going to get some out. And so I had played around with it in my process. So when I was thinking about developing a novel writing course, um, it's very hard to have a novel workshop run the way that you would with short forms. Um, if you have people coming in with full drafts, it's still hard to kind of figuring out the workshopping mode to like get everyone a proper read of their work. But most people aren't coming in with full drafts, so how do you do that? Just workshopping, the beginning isn't always helpful for people. Usually people are just asking you the questions that you're going to get to later. And so thinking through what I could do for all these students who wanted to write novels and who were writing novels, I really realized that what they needed was this process focused class and to have ways to generate and have different ways to think about their writing and think about developing a process that would work for them. And my main goal in running a workshop like this is not necessarily um, thinking about what happens to this particular project in the future, but really helping you develop a process that will work for you in the future. So maybe the idea right now, you end up, leaving it behind because you have some other idea that's going to work better for you, or that you get excited about. What kind of tools can I offer that are going to help you get that book written or your 10th book written 5 years from now or whatever it is. And so that's really how that course developed, and also just through my own experience of writing my first novel and what I found I needed as a writer.
That was not the answer I expected. I love that.
Really?
I assumed that it was just I assumed you had like a first book that didn't go well, and then, your second book is the one that you ended up publishing and developed around that process. So that was awesome. And I also love that you specifically said maybe this one doesn't work out, and that's okay. We're learning all the time. All the content we generate matters. That's I think like that can be debilitating to realize that you're leaving something behind, and
Oh
it
yeah.
can really like paralyze you from working more again. So having that just statement in the world is so beautiful and so important. I've got two more questions. I'm gonna try and decide what order to ask them in. Because I like my last question as my last question, but the flow of I'll say my whole process aloud. Um, I would love to hear a little bit about your work with the Penn Prison and Justice program, or why you think that work's important, or what you do there. You can choose one of those
Um,
to answer.
sure. So I started working with them in the summer of 2020. It was something I'd wanted to do for a long time. And I was paired with a poet, and he's a very serious poet. I could tell by his work right away. And we've been working together for almost 5 years now. And basically, how it works is it's really old school, it's letter writing. Um, Literally, I write things and Penn prints them out and mails them to him, and he gets them in the mail and writes back and it goes to them and they scan it and send it to me. It can be very frustrating, and I feel like it must be even more frustrating for him that there's this lag. But I feel like what he needs most and what every writer needs most, and I've realized it more about myself by working in this program, is just community and someone to talk to about your writing and your reading, and someone who cares about it and just wants to hear how it's going and wants to share what they're reading. And, that's one of the things that has developed, I think, most about our relationship in this program is that, I send him reading recommendations, just things that I'm reading, and he comes across things and recommends things to me. And it's really rewarding just, one writer talking to another. And in addition to me giving him feedback on his poems, I've sent him some of my stuff and he gives me feedback. And he's such a careful reader. It is so helpful for me. And so, yeah, it's been really rewarding and just knowing more about the program, and how it developed and all the different things they're trying to just, give people who are incarcerated kind of what they need, as artists and as people. And yeah, I think people who are compelled to write, I think when you're in a situation when you're isolated and don't have control over almost any part of your life, being able to, decide what you're putting on the page and what you're writing about and who you're going to share it with. I feel like that's really, really important. And yeah, it's been a wonderful experience.
That makes me so happy. You gave me an incredible segue and I just got distracted by just the positive, beautiful things you were saying. The segue is um before I was an employee of the Writing Center, I was a member. Um guess I still am a member, but um I always looked forward to the conference specifically because it was a going to these events, but especially the conference is a time when I become a bajillion times more generative. And I think as much as taking classes and talking to experts, being in community just makes you in community. Um, being surrounded by other people who care about this stuff, who are
Yeah.
excited about this stuff, who are excited about your work and whose work you're excited about is it's the secret ingredient, right? To creating more and better. That was my segue to just talk about why the conference rocks.
Yeah, it does.
And then my last question before I just let you do whatever you want to say. Um why fiction? What do you love about writing or storytelling?
Oh, that's such a good question.
Yeah, I chose the last one to be easy. You're
Yeah,
welcome.
easiest question in the world. I have written a lot of different genres. I wrote poetry and fiction somewhat equally until at some point in college. Um, I took a fiction workshop with Karen Ryle, who's now the editor-in-chief of Cleaver magazine and is just a really wonderful mentor and citizen of the literary community. And I don't know, something just came alive in me in the way that she was teaching that course. And I realized that I had more insight into my fiction than I did with my poetry. Felt like I would write poems, but I wouldn't know necessarily what they needed afterwards, or I wouldn't necessarily have any sense of like why people like them or didn't like them or thought they were finished or not finished. So I still really enjoy writing poetry. Um, but I find that fiction is kind of almost like this mental puzzle that I love diving into and figuring out. So, I'm not the kind of writer, as you might have gathered from other things I've said, who has like the big picture from the start. I just have these things I'm interested in, or that I'm confused by, or that I think are strange or beautiful, or both. And that, I'm just kind of figuring out, okay, how do all these things fit together? And, or how do I dramatize these big questions I have? And what is this going to look like? And where are these characters going to go? And so I feel like fiction just really occupies my mind in this really productive, helpful way that I really love. I do write some nonfiction, and that's taken me longer to get into. And I think it's a fear of sharing personal things. I think that fiction, in some ways, is also a way to camouflage some things about yourself that you may want to write about, but not want to reveal as personal or autobiographical. So I wouldn't say my writing is autobiographical, but there are certainly things that come into it. So nonfiction has been something that I've come to more slowly, and I'm very um, I really admire people who have the bravery to write nonfiction all the time, and memoirs especially. But it's something I'm getting more into. But I feel like fiction is just always going to be my main passion and the thing that I feel most proud of in what I write.
I love that. You made me realize something. This is not about me, but here we are. I ended up getting into fiction because I went to art school very briefly, and I was like, I'm a creative writing student, and they were like, fiction writing, and I wanted both. I would have gone toward poetry if I knew it was an option. I don't remember if it was an option. Um, and then I ended up in nonfiction because I realized even when I didn't know it, I was not writing fiction. Even, yeah, I didn't always realize I was writing about myself, but
Mhm.
um awesome. That's I don't know, it feels very sweet that you've shared so much. Is there anything else you would like to add for potential future conference goers or just generally out of the goodness of your heart?
Sure. I just want to say that one of the things I love about these kinds of conferences is how many different people are gathering together for so many different reasons. And there are people who've been writing for years, and maybe people who are retired and later in life they realize that there's this thing they wanted to try or always wanted to do and didn't have time. And I just think that that's really inspiring that, people are finding time and really kind of investing in themselves by signing up for a conference like this. And I really am inspired by that. And I agree with you that I think conferences like this, even if they only go for a few days, can sometimes be more productive for your writing than 6 months of something else, just because you're around so many people who are excited to create and excited to hear about what you're creating too. So I think it's a great opportunity. People are able to join the conference this summer or in the future. And I'll also just say that I am working on my second novel that has been an incredibly long haul. And so as I go into this workshop with the workshop members, I am a working writer right alongside them in the thick of it and figuring it out together. So
I'm so excited to know that you're also like in progress. That's
that's
awesome.
yeah.
Also, thank you for selling the conference. That was awesome. That's all I've got for you today. I'm really excited personally to take this class, and I assume anybody who tunes in will be too, because I mean, you seem like a great person to work with. So
Thank
thank you
you.
so much for hanging out with me today.
Thank
Um,
you, Sarah. It was great to talk to you.
I'll see you in a month.
Okay. Yeah. See you then. Take care.